Hi. I'd like to share with you some of my lessons learned from leading a project team remotely and ways perhaps that you can do it better, learning from my experience. During my Big Four consulting tenure, when I worked for a giant consulting firm, I was supporting a federal client, and our company already thought they had a culture that enabled a remote model. Actually, the model was basically a policy where each employee was issued a laptop computer loaded with Skype for Business, you remember Skype, and a mobile phone with an unlimited data plan. And those two things essentially enabled us to be remote. So we had the hardware to enable it, but not really any guidelines, best practices, or actual established written policies. And on this particular engagement I'm referring to with this federal client, I was the program manager for what started as a 9-member team, but we only had one on-site workstation at the client location. So we were basically all remote. And then when COVID hit, it solidified all that and we were completely remote. During this time, I began to realize that this remote environment didn't provide sufficient interaction for me, with my team, or among my team members. Well, how did I know this wasn't sufficient? The team's work products were mediocre. They rarely truly captured what I was looking for and what I expected. I felt detached from the team members. I often had to repeat myself in group settings and individually when I would have one-on-one conversations. And I realized over time, I knew very little about them as people. And I had few opportunities to stay up to speed on their ambitions and development because our interaction was all scheduled according to the engagement. So in essence, I was unable to be their leader the way I wanted to. And I believe they needed and deserved more than I was providing. So over time, I began to implement some changes. I started by having an individual conversation with each of them to solicit their perspective on the situation and how we could improve things. We talked about what was working and what wasn't working. What would they change if they were in my position? What would they leave as it is? I also had to recreate some of the informal interactions that used to occur in the workspace, at the client site, in the office. These interactions that we lost because of the limitations of our remote environment, specifically, the informal chat at the coffee machine, or waiting for the elevator, or riding the elevator, or at the copier, or those sorts of quick little snippets where information and niceties are exchanged and honestly relationships are built. So what did I do? Well, I set a few policies in place. Let me share. So I started by setting some normal and the expectations for normal working hours. It's real easy to fall in the trap of, hey, I don't need to log on until I have a meeting where I have to show up, right? Well, what if I need to reach you and it's before you're ready to go? So we just set during the day some normal working hours that were well beyond the typical 9 to 5 because of the lives we had to lead. Also, I set some rules for when and why we use email, text, IM, Skype, Zoom, or a voice call. And this was important because we used all of these, but they come with different levels of appropriateness. And we had to set some rules about why we would use each one. Email may not be something that I need the answer to, but if I send you a text message, I probably need the answer now. Same way, if I get an email from you, I might not prioritize it as high as an IM message or a text message I get from you. We also talked about the response times. In other words, if I send you a text message, I probably need that answer quicker than if I send you an email. So we talked about all of those and developed protocols around them, the applicability and the precedents, etc. We also set a daily cadence for full team communication. Because we're not in the office anymore, we're not on the client site to get together, we still need to rally to be a team. I decided a couple of times a day, and I got some good input from one of my subject matter experts, a more senior individual, very experienced program manager who made this suggestion. He said, look, if we got to use Zoom, let's start the day and end the day together. And then whatever happens in the middle is based on the schedule and the pop-ups that are inevitable. So we set an 8 a.m. stand-up meeting. Everybody dials into Zoom. We only schedule it for 15 minutes, but everybody's there to kick the day off. And then a 5 p.m. stand down. And everyone attends both of these. Again, only scheduled for 15 minutes. And if you have a conflict, just let me know. I also set a video first, cameras on policy for the PM call. I let it slide for the morning. That way, we absolutely get to see each other. And it's not as good as being live and in person, but it's better than nothing. Finally, I set a policy that the afternoon meeting was more than just a mandatory meeting. This was also our all-together team time. So we'd mix it up with fun stuff beyond just work. I started leading a Trivia Tuesday, and we did several happy hour Fridays where you could dress up, wear a costume, we'd make it a theme, bring a drink, etc. On many Wednesdays, I'd let other team members kind of teach or share something that was of a personal interest to them. One member had gone to school in France. Another got her degree in the UK. One was an Arabic linguist from his time in the Army. One of them spent most of COVID in his grandfather's cottage on Cape Cod. Everybody's got personal lives. Pull that sort of stuff out of your team, and that helps build some bonds. And this way, by letting them talk about it, everyone got to share some of their personal lives with the team. I also made it a point to up my routine of one-to-one check-ins with each of them. I wanted them to know I was interested in them. I needed them to feel comfortable coming to me with questions and for guidance. This way I could head off potential problems, and they would spend less time working on the wrong stuff. I'd pop in on everyone in some manner each day, and maybe that means I send them a text message, or we have a back and forth convo on the IM filled with emojis, or maybe I just send an instant Zoom meeting request. What were some of the results? Well, how'd it work, right? The quality of the work products improved, providing better, more responsive support to the client. We expanded our scope of work by 3x with a corresponding growth in millions of dollars. I learned a lot more about each team member's strengths, their weaknesses, and their preferences. And this allowed me to more effectively assign and delegate tasks. I gained insight into their aspirations and career goals. And to this day, I'm still in touch with several of them, tracking their progress as they moved on. I developed an appreciation for their communication styles and their work preferences and personalities. And they learned I was real. And they would come to me for advice and mentorship beyond just the project tasks. This also gave me a laboratory to develop my own skills as a leader. Practice setting expectations, monitoring progress, communicating more effectively, and finally developing trust, influence, and relationships. So some lessons on how to lead remotely: invest in tools and tech. Good speakers, good cameras, headsets, monitors, mobile keyboards. This all makes a difference in the all-day, stuck in one spot, remote experience, especially for many of my program project team members who are stuck in tiny little Washington, D.C. apartments. You as the leader, you have to expend emotional capital. Fill the void of lost informal conversations and interaction by making deliberate efforts to connect with your team members, as if you were dropping by their cube. Push more information up the chain to keep your senior leaders informed, too. Watch your team members for signs of fatigue and distress. And don't forget to incorporate some fun into the work. Share personal things when appropriate. And I think you'll find you're a much more effective remote leader.